Hey cousins, welcome to Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas.
Welcome, cousins, to this episode of Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas. I'm your host, Cornell Wright, the people's lobbyist. As you all are already doing, I'm sure, let's talk about the Ukraine situation. Now, cousins, let me first and foremost say that what's happening to the good people in Ukraine is wrong. That's a bad idea on the part of the Russian government and particularly the Russian leadership in order to invade a country and then trying to justify that saying things like they're not a country, they belong to us, all that sort of thing, right? But let me take two cuts on this for you, cousins, and also maybe a third one to give you a little bit more information to kind of pay attention to some things, all right? First is that what's happening in Ukraine, as I mentioned, is wrong. The Russian military going in there. Fortunately, the Ukrainian people, to their credit, are fighting back courageously. Fortunately, because NATO is still strong, because the United States of America is a part of NATO, they were able to rely on NATO's support and help in order to kind of thwart and or cut down the Russian advance. And now that there's getting weapons from the United States and other NATO nations, I think they have a pretty good case of pushing this thing to a stalemate. And then because how expensive war is and because of the embargoes that have been placed on Russia, that might help to tamper things down a little bit. I don't know. I'm not an international diplomat, but I just pay attention to things and I got some bad ideas. So cousins, I think that's going to work out to where the Ukrainians are going to be able to remain to be independent. Certainly, the Russians are tearing up a whole bunch of their country. Too many people have died unnecessarily, as well as some Russians have died unnecessarily, right? Because if there wasn't a war, neither side would have to die. So as a result, a shooting war. Let me make that point, a shooting war. So as a result of that, cousins, that's a bad situation, and I think it's going to resolve itself in not nuclear war. Okay, because if we did that, think about that just sets up a whole bunch of bad things that none of us want to deal with, right? Talk about bad idea, that's maybe number one on the list. So I think that's going to resolve itself. So here's to the Ukrainian people, continue to be strong and continue to have the support of the United States as much as possible without it being a direct conflict with Russia militarily. I'll get to that in a minute. So cousins, when I say direct contact militarily, now I'm not a military expert. I pay attention to things. I watch some programs every now and then, and they talk about a no-fly zone. Well, cousins, think about that conceptually. I think it was former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice says, if you establish a no-fly zone and you declare it, you have to defend a no-fly zone. You with me there, cousins? So once you say, okay, there's a no-fly zone in this area, and a Russian plane flies into that no-fly zone there, what do you have to do? You are compelled to shoot them down, right? Because that's violation of the no-fly zone. So anytime you say that, that's almost saying, well, that means as soon as somebody comes across the area, or airspace as the case might be, we're going to engage. We're going to have our fighter pilots and missile systems and all that kind of stuff engage and attempt to do harmful damage to that Russian invader in that case. Bad situation, okay? Tantamount to starting a shooting war between the United States and Russia in that regard. So, bad idea, right? But so you start looking at this whole thing, cousins, and so you think about it, the United States has actually been in this kind of conflict, if you will, with Russia before. Think about not very long ago with Syria, right? So I think that's referred to as a proxy war, cousins. A proxy war. That's saying that Russia supports one side, the United States supports another side, or another country supports the other side, and the people who live in that city or that country, they're the ones involved in the actual conflict. They're the ones actually experiencing mortal harm. They're the ones that are getting the country torn up because they're getting support from these other sides. This is not new in that regard, right? Syria's been a situation. It's happened in a number of countries around the world. South America, in the Middle East, okay, certainly in Africa, and even in some parts of Europe. It's also happened before in different ways. So because of that, this proxy war is nothing new. What is new is that the amount of attention that's being paid to it. All right, cousins? The amount of attention. So in each one of those proxy wars, cousins, we are supporting our side with intelligence, with military arms, with, other support structures. Who knows what all comes into play, right? But then so is Russia. And now these things happen behind the scenes to us usually. They are diplomatic, and then there's some jousting back and forth, and then based upon some aspects, things occur. So recognize in Syria, we stepped away under the former president, right? And then they basically won and suppressed the democratic opportunities moving there. Ukraine's a little bit different. They have an established democratic government, and so the United States has had a position of supporting them for years, and so now Russia's starting to move into it, and we're pushing back through the appropriate aspects of NATO and within the alliances we have to the extent of not having a shooting war with Russia. You got that? Because who wants that? Nobody. That's bad news. And you may say, well, yeah, we want to go do this, and, we're the big dog. Well, yeah, cousins, but every time you do something, there's a repercussion, right? A repercussion and escalation. And so what really needs to happen now, in my opinion, is that you got the leader of Russia looking real bad, okay? Because this military is supposed to walk in there, have a picnic one day, raise a new flag, put in some new leaders who support Russia, and everything's looking good. Hasn't worked out that way because the folks in the Ukraine president in particular, in my opinion, stepped up big time. Here's to you, President of Ukraine. So that's two, cousins. One, what's happening in Ukraine. Two is the proxy war is nothing new. It's now occurring there. The third item, this kind of blends in with a couple other things, is think about how we are getting information and how information is being presented to us regarding this conflict. As I mentioned to you, there's been other conflicts around the world that have also been proxy wars between the United States and Russia, maybe between other countries as well. But they have not gotten the attention from the media. They have not gotten the attention from the public. They have not gotten the attention from the various Red Cross and some of the other organizations to the same level that the people in the Ukraine have gotten. Think about in South America. Think about Africa, the ongoing blood and diamond conflicts that have been going on for decades, right? In South America, for the various aspects there, for the various, for timber and those kind of things, in Asia and other countries around the world. This is not new. And other people have not gotten the same level of support and or attention that we're now getting and providing to the Ukraine. So on part of this, you might say, well, gee, the Ukraine deserves our support. Yes, it does. But I would counter that by saying, what about these other countries? Did they not also deserve to have freedoms and rights and people not getting killed, and they need to have the same level of support perhaps as the Ukraine is experiencing? Let's talk about that, because that's another subject for another time on brown liquor and bad ideas. We've talked about on other episodes of Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas about disinformation and misinformation. We haven't talked about propaganda, but it's all part of the overall propaganda machine and mechanism. And so think about it, cousins. We've heard and are very clear that the Russian leadership has even gone so far as to outlaw calling the invasion by Russia into Ukraine a war. They can't call it an invasion. The press is being suppressed, and information sources, including the internet, all those things are being suppressed so that the information is going to the majority of the Russian people is so much different than what we're seeing here on our side of the world with theoretically more available information. All right? But you think about this, cousin. What does it mean then? But when you think about it, misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda are tools. Tools that are used in order to what? Sway opinion, craft opinion, create opinion, in order so people feel certain ways about things. So the information you have falls into the ways in which you process that information, so that you'll start to feel certain ways, you want to vote for certain things, you want to take certain positions on things. You with me, cousins? So we're getting the same thing. But think about this. It was reported last couple of weeks that a very popular U.S. television program was being shown in Russia because it was positive to the Russian position. Isn't that interesting? That so here in the United States, we're basically getting Russia propaganda. All right? Think about that. So you continue on with that, cousins, is that we are getting a lot of information. So how many times have you seen that picture of the bombing of the maternity hospital? It's horrific, but they continue to show that on the various streams, right? We continue to see the picture of the small group of guys, or soldiers rather, from Ukraine fighting, and they're fighting off against someone, and they have, anti-tank weapons on their backs and that sort of thing, being stalwart and brave. We appreciate that. But recognize that every one of these cousins is helping us to have an understanding and a particular point of view as it relates to the conflict. All right? Propaganda, misinformation, and disinformation are tools. How they're used both positively and negatively depends somewhat on you and somewhat on the objective of what's being done. Now, I personally think that in this case, the United States need to be in support of the Ukraine, because where do we have an invasion force that doesn't get stopped in a pure militaristic, blatant approach as Russia's now taking it? If we can step up, we need to do that. But as I mentioned earlier, cousins, if we make a stand and call there from the United States, where else do we need to make that stand and call and recognize the impact that has on the United States economy, on our economy, our taxes, and the things that we're putting priority on, not only in the world, but in our own country. All right? But the most important piece of this whole conversation, cousins, with the bad ideas, other than the Ukraine winning, is recognizing and observing propaganda being used for us and against us, all on our own TVs. You with me, cousins? Pay attention, because those same techniques are being used on a regular basis. Thank you for joining me on this week of Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas. You take care of yourself. Keep your eyes open. See you soon.
We are the people. We are the people.
Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas is intended for the participation of responsible adults of legal drinking age who wish to engage in substantive virtual discussions and social drinking for entertainment purposes only. Brown Liquor and Bad Ideas does not advocate the abuse of alcoholic beverages. Choosing to participate in any of the drinking activities shared in the program should be made with moderation and caution and is the sole responsibility of the user.